My sister vanished 12 years ago and left her 4 kids on my doorstep without a single word. I spent years raising them, loving them, and giving them the life she walked away from. But when she finally came back, she didn't return with thanks or apologies. She came back with police officers, accusing me of kidnapping the very children she abandoned. That was the moment I understood something painful and frightening. She wasn't just trying to take the kids away. She was trying to erase me from their lives completely. I remember freezing in place when the officer said her name. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times over the years, but never like this. Never angry. Never scared. I always thought she'd show up tired, sorry, maybe even ready to rebuild. Instead, she stood there acting like I had stolen something from her, like I was the villain in her story. She pretended those kids hadn't cried for her every night for the first 2 years. She pretended I hadn't worked double shifts to keep a roof over their heads. She pretended the truth didn't exist. But I knew the truth. And deep down, I knew she did too. Still, hearing her accuse me of kidnapping shook me. It felt like my whole world tilted. For 12 years, I was the one who held the kids when they were sick, helped with homework, and cheered at school plays. I was the one they ran to. I was the one who stayed. And now she wanted to pretend none of that mattered. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I still remember that February night as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The cold air outside felt heavier than usual, and I was already getting ready for bed when loud knocking echoed through my hallway. When I opened the door, my sister Lynette stood there, breathing hard, her eyes wide like she was running from something I couldn't see. Before I could even ask what was wrong, she hurried the 4 kids inside. Their faces were pale, their clothes messy, and all of them looked confused and scared. Lynette didn't step into the house. She stayed on the porch, glancing over her shoulder like someone might be watching her. Her voice was shaky when she told me she would come back after the weekend. She didn't explain where she was going. She didn't say why she was leaving them with me. She didn't answer a single question. Before I could stop her, she turned around and rushed down the driveway, disappearing into the dark without looking back. I stood there, holding the doorknob, listening to the quiet that followed her. 4 kids were standing in my living room, Marlo, Remy, Ellis, and baby Kelby, waiting for answers I didn't have. I tried to calm them, but inside, I felt a knot growing in my chest. Something about the way Lynette fled told me she wasn't coming back anytime soon. That night changed everything. I had no warning, no time to prepare, no idea what kind of life the kids had just come from. All I knew was that they needed someone, and I was the only adult in the room. I made them warm food, set up blankets, and stayed awake beside them until morning. By sunrise, it was clear, whatever Lynette had walked away from, I was now responsible for holding together. The first few days felt like stepping into a life I had never trained for. One moment I was managing my own quiet routine, and the next I was trying to figure out how to care for 4 kids who needed everything at once. Mornings started before sunrise with feeding bottles, tying shoes, and searching for missing homework. Evenings ended long after dark with laundry piles, dishes stacked high, and a crying newborn who had no name on her birth certificate. I gave her the name Kelby because the empty space on the form made my stomach twist. It felt wrong for a baby to have no identity at all. I picked up extra hours at work and found another part-time job on weekends. Every dollar mattered. There were school forms that needed signatures, lunches that had to be packed, and meetings with teachers who had never seen me before. I walked into those rooms pretending I had everything under control, even though inside I felt like I was slipping. The kids were trying to adjust too. Marlo asked simple questions I couldn't answer, and Remy kept checking the window as if hoping someone familiar would walk through it. I tried to stay calm for their sake, even on the nights when exhaustion made my eyes burn. At first, I told myself Lynette needed time. Maybe she was sorting out something complicated. Maybe she would call any minute. I held on to that thought longer than I should have. Days stacked into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The kids stopped asking about her as often, but I still checked my phone out of habit. Then the seasons changed again, and a quiet truth settled in: she wasn't coming back. And somehow, without planning it, I had become the person holding this little family together. Once the chaos of those early months settled, I started focusing on giving the kids a real sense of stability. The first step was getting all the paperwork sorted so they could attend school without confusion. It took long lines, forms I had never seen before, and more signatures than I could count, but eventually each child had a place in a classroom where they felt safe. I walked them in on the first day, holding their hands and promising I'd be there when the final bell rang. After that came the medical appointments. Some checkups were routine, others required follow-ups, but I showed up to every single one. I learned their allergies, their favorite snacks from the waiting room vending machine, and how to soothe their nerves when a needle made them tense. Each responsibility felt heavier than the last, yet somehow it also felt right. To keep everything running, I added more hours at work. Some nights I came home tired enough to fall asleep standing, but when I saw their shoes by the door or heard their chatter from the kitchen, a second wind always kicked in. Practical routines slowly turned into something warmer. We established Friday pancake nights, homework sessions around the table, and quiet talks before bed. Somewhere along the way, Marlo, always the cautious one, tested out a new name for me. "Mom Lee," she whispered one afternoon while helping me fold laundry. The words caught me off guard. It wasn't forced, it wasn't confused, it was honest. The moment settled deep inside me. That simple nickname changed how I saw everything. These weren't kids I was keeping safe until someone returned. They were part of my heart, part of my days, part of my future. Without realizing it, I had built a home around them, and they had built their trust around me. 12 years passed before anything from Lynette appeared. Life had grown steady by then. The kids were older, confident, and settled into their own routines. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary the day the mail arrived. But mixed in with bills and ads was an envelope with handwriting I hadn't seen since the night she disappeared. My hands tightened instantly. I stood at the counter for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Part of me thought it might finally be the explanation I had waited for, some sign that she had realized what she had done. Maybe she wanted to make peace. Maybe time had changed her. When I opened the letter, that hope vanished in seconds. There was no greeting. No warmth. Not even a single line acknowledging everything that had happened over the years. Instead, her message was cold and direct. She wrote that she would be arriving soon and expected me to prepare her children for pickup. She didn't mention the memories we had built, the years of care, or the effort it took to keep everyone afloat. She didn't ask about their well-being. She didn't ask about mine. Reading those words felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. It was as if she believed I had simply filled in for her while she enjoyed her time away. As if the countless nights, the report cards, the birthday candles, and the emergencies meant nothing. She erased everything with one short demand. I set the letter down, feeling the room tilt. After all this time, she acted like she could walk in and claim a life she had abandoned without hesitation. There was no apology, just ownership, like the kids were belongings she had misplaced. It became clear in that moment, whatever was coming next wasn't going to be simple, and it wasn't going to be fair. A week after the letter arrived, I woke to a knock that felt different from anything I'd heard before. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers were standing on my porch. Their serious faces made my stomach drop before they even spoke. They asked for me by name, and I felt a chill run through my arms. They explained they were responding to a report made earlier that morning. According to the statement they received, I had taken 4 children without permission and refused all contact with their legal parent. Hearing those words made my legs weak. I knew immediately who had made the report. The officers read from their notes, saying the mother claimed she had left her children in my care only briefly and that I had then blocked her involvement. She accused me of shutting her out, keeping the kids hidden, and creating distance on purpose. Each accusation cut deeper than the last. It was like watching her rewrite history right in front of me. I told the officers the truth, that she had vanished 12 years earlier, leaving 4 frightened children at my door with no plan to return. I explained how I had cared for them since that night, but I spoke calmly, knowing anger wouldn't help. They listened carefully but said they were required to follow up on every claim. The kids came into the hallway, their faces full of confusion as they looked at the officers. Seeing them there made the situation even heavier. They had grown up under my roof, trusting that their world was safe and steady. Now someone who had been absent for more than a decade was trying to tear that world apart with a single accusation. When the officers left, I felt the weight of her actions settle on my shoulders. She wasn't just challenging my role, she was trying to destroy the life we had built. When the officers left, the house felt strangely quiet. The kids gathered around me, their faces tense and unsure. They were teenagers now, old enough to understand the seriousness of what had just happened. None of them had any real memory of Lynette, and the idea of being forced into the care of someone they barely knew frightened them more than anything. Marlo was the first to speak. Her voice cracked as she asked why someone who had been gone so long suddenly wanted control. She kept pacing, rubbing her arms, looking like she was trying to make sense of a stranger claiming to be her parent. Remy stayed close to the wall, silent but shaken. The news hit Ellis hard too. He kept staring at the floor, his jaw tight, like he was bracing himself for something he couldn't stop. Then Kelby stepped forward. She looked up at me with wide, worried eyes and asked the question that nearly broke me, "Am I going to lose my real mom?" The way she said it, soft, scared, honest, made my heart twist. She wasn't talking about biology. She was talking about the person who had been there for every scraped knee, every school project, every long night when she couldn't sleep. I felt something shift inside me at that moment. Until then, I had been running on fear and shock, trying to process what Lynette was trying to do. But hearing the kids' voices, seeing their fear, changed everything. My sadness turned into something sharper, something stronger. Their reactions reminded me of the years we had built together, years she hadn't been part of. These children didn't see me as a temporary guardian. They saw me as their anchor, their home, their family. And the thought of someone trying to rip that apart filled me with a determination I hadn't felt before. I knew then, I wasn't just defending myself, I was protecting them. After seeing how shaken the kids were, I knew I couldn't face this situation alone. The next morning, I met with an attorney named Tess Calder, a woman known for being calm but fiercely determined. I laid out everything I knew, from the night Lynette disappeared to the sudden accusations. Tess listened carefully, taking notes without interrupting. When I finished, she tapped her pen once and said we needed to understand where Lynette had been all these years. That began a long process of gathering information. Tess filed requests, searched public records, and followed trails I never would have known existed. What we uncovered painted a picture very different from the story Lynette was trying to sell. We learned she had moved from place to place, never staying long. Creditors had been chasing her across state lines, and she left behind unpaid bills and broken agreements at every stop. At one point, she had access to a large amount of money, but instead of using it to build a stable life, she went through it in a short time, leaving nothing behind. The most alarming discovery came from records showing she had spent several years with a man who had a long criminal history. There were reports of arrests, disputes, and investigations surrounding him. It became clear that Lynette had been living in chaos, tied to someone who made her situation even worse. None of it matched the version she presented to the authorities. Each new detail shifted the weight inside my chest. I had once believed she might return with remorse, but the truth showed something else entirely. She hadn't been lost or trying to rebuild. She had been running, from responsibility, from consequences, and from every mess she created. By the time Tess finished her research, one thing was certain: Lynette's return wasn't about the kids. It was about what she could gain by claiming them. As Tess continued gathering information, new documents started coming in from the court and different agencies. One file in particular stopped both of us cold. It contained details about the man Lynette had been living with during the past few years. According to the records, he was legally restricted from having any children in his care due to previous charges involving neglect and endangerment. The restriction was clear and permanent. That one detail changed the entire picture. If Lynette's partner couldn't be around minors, then having the kids labeled under her name would create a way around those rules. She could claim that she alone was responsible for them, allowing him to stay in her life without facing consequences. It also explained why she suddenly reappeared after so long. More documents showed something else. She had applied for several forms of public assistance before, but without dependents, she didn't qualify for some of the benefits she wanted. With 4 children listed under her care, she would gain access to financial support she couldn't get on her own. It wasn't about reconnecting. It was about money and clearing her own path. As I read through the pages, my hands grew cold. All those years I wondered if she felt guilt or regret, but the truth was far more painful. She hadn't returned because she missed them or because she realized what she had done. She returned because they were useful to her now. The realization struck hard. The kids weren't people in her eyes, they were leverage. A way to fix her problems, secure income, and hide the restrictions placed on her partner. She wasn't trying to rebuild a family. She was trying to benefit from one she had walked away from. Accepting that truth hurt, but it also brought clarity. I knew exactly what I was fighting against now. Once the truth about Lynette's motives became clear, Tess moved quickly. She said we needed to be ready for a custody battle that could determine the rest of the kids' lives. From that moment on, our days were filled with gathering every piece of evidence showing the care I had provided over the years. Tess requested school files that documented attendance, grades, and notes from staff who had watched the kids grow under my care. Teachers wrote statements describing how I was always the one attending meetings, signing forms, and staying involved in their progress. Some even shared memories from moments when the kids needed extra support and I was there without hesitation. Medical offices sent over stacks of records, appointments, vaccinations, emergency visits, all signed by me. These papers showed years of responsibility, consistency, and decisions made with their well-being in mind. Tess organized everything in neat folders, each one proving a part of the life we had built together. While Tess worked through all the documents, the kids watched quietly, aware of how serious things had become. One evening, they asked if they were allowed to speak in court. I hesitated at first, not wanting to put pressure on them. But they insisted. They said they wanted the judge to hear their own voices, not just read words on paper. They wanted to make it clear who had been there for them and who hadn't. Their determination surprised me. Seeing how calm and steady they were made something inside me settle. I wasn't walking into that courtroom alone. They weren't confused or divided, they knew where they belonged. Their choice gave me the strength I needed. No matter how the hearing turned out, we were walking into it as a united family, ready to tell the truth together. The day of the hearing arrived, and the courtroom felt heavier than I expected. Lynette sat across the room, acting calm and collected, as if the past 12 years were nothing more than a misunderstanding. When the judge began asking questions, she lifted her chin and spoke with confidence that stunned me. When the judge asked why she had left the children, she didn't hesitate. She claimed I had begged to keep them for a while and that she had agreed out of kindness. She said she had always intended to return and that I had twisted the situation to make myself look like a hero. Hearing her say those words felt unreal, like she was performing for someone who didn't know the truth. Tess stayed composed, taking notes, but I could feel anger burning in my chest. Then the judge asked her why she never reached out. Her story began to shift. She mentioned phone calls she couldn't prove, messages that didn't exist, and excuses that didn't line up. The more she spoke, the more tangled her explanations became. It was only a matter of time before the inconsistencies caught the judge's attention. Before Tess could even respond, Marlo stood up. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was clear. She told the judge exactly what happened the night Lynette left, how she pushed them inside the house and walked away without a plan to return. She explained how I had been the one raising them, day after day, while Lynette disappeared from their lives entirely. Her honesty filled the room. The judge leaned forward, visibly concerned, and asked Lynette to explain the conflicting details. Lynette stumbled through her answers, unable to keep her story straight. Moments later, the judge announced that there would be a full investigation into possible child abandonment and fraud. The entire courtroom shifted. For the first time, the truth had power. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable as the judge called for a recess before announcing the decision. I sat with the kids, holding my hands together tightly, listening to their quiet whispers and small sighs. They were as nervous as I was, but there was also a sense of relief in the air. The truth had been spoken, and now it was time for the law to acknowledge it. When the judge returned, Lynette's expression had shifted. Her confidence was gone, replaced by a thin mask of frustration and disbelief. The judge began by addressing the evidence and testimonies, laying out the timeline of abandonment, neglect, and manipulation. Every document, every teacher's note, every medical record we had gathered was referenced. The kids' statements were highlighted as vital, showing not only the care I had provided but also the emotional bond we shared. Then came the verdict. Lynette lost custody entirely. The court concluded she had abandoned her children for over a decade and had made false claims to gain control. Beyond losing the children, she faced charges for child abandonment and providing misleading statements to authorities. It was more than just a legal defeat, it was a public acknowledgement of her actions. When the judge finally turned to me, the words felt almost surreal. Full permanent custody was granted. Every year, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had been recognized. I wasn't just the person caring for them, I was their legal mother, their guardian in every sense that mattered. The kids hugged me tightly, and I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion wash over me. The courtroom, which had been heavy with tension, suddenly seemed lighter. 12 years of fear, uncertainty, and sacrifice had led to this moment. I had not only protected them but also secured their future. At that moment, I knew, without a doubt, that nothing, or no one, could take our family apart again. After the verdict, I could have taken every opportunity to make Lynette pay. I could have pushed for stricter penalties, demanded restitution, or made sure her mistakes followed her for years. But as I looked at the kids, their faces full of relief and trust, I realized that none of that mattered. The real consequence of her actions was already in place. She had lost them forever, not through punishment, but because she had abandoned them, and we had built a life she could no longer touch. I decided my revenge would be quiet but complete. She would have to live knowing she had walked away from the family she could never replace. She would see that the children she left behind thrived, that they were happy, loved, and safe. That truth would follow her more than any court ruling ever could. The kids gathered around me that evening, asking questions about what would happen next. Kelby squeezed my hand and asked if I was going to stay their mom forever. Marlo and Remy nodded, their eyes bright with hope and relief. I looked at each of them, my chest swelling with a mix of pride and love. I always was, I told them softly, my voice steady. And I always will be. They leaned into me, some resting their heads on my shoulders, others holding my hands tightly. For the first time in years, the weight of fear and uncertainty lifted from all of us. The house, once a place of frantic nights and worry, now felt like home in a way it never had before. The truth was simple, I didn't need the law to punish her, and I didn't need anger to feel victorious. Our family had survived, grown stronger, and become unbreakable. That was the only justice that mattered, and it was one I would carry quietly, proudly, and forever.